In this episode, we are going to be reviewing the Italian classic film I Vitelloni, which was released in 1953. This was directed by Federico Fellini, and it starred Alberto Sordi, Franco Fabrizi, Franco Interlenghi, Leopoldo Trieste, and Riccardo Fellini. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore movies from all over the world and talk about how those stories were told on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, and theater. I want to welcome back to the show Sam Dunkley, who is a YouTuber. His channel is called Film Blogger Sam, where he discusses films, Blu-rays, and physical media. Sam, thanks so much for doing this. Welcome back.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me back on. And I'm excited to just have a chat about film. It's just, what my favorite thing to do. So thanks for having me back on.
My pleasure. No, anytime. Before we jump into the film, I was curious, are you a Fellini fan in general? What's your experience with his movies?
I thought you might ask that question. So I'm a huge fan of some of Fellini's films. I'm not like a Fellini purist or anything like that. I do think that 8.5 is one of the greatest films ever made.
Oh yeah.
But there are some Fellini films, some maybe like The White Sheik, I don't think is very good. Yeah, we could talk about some of those things as we discuss. I'm not very good at pronunciation of Italian. So is it
do your best?
I Vitelloni? Is it
yeah.
I Vitelloni?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
That's cool. This is the first time that I've seen the film that we're going to be discussing. So, but yeah, I'm a fan of some of Fellini's work, and some of it I think is okay. And to be honest, I haven't seen any of his later stuff. So the stuff that came out at the end of the 70s and the 80s, his later period stuff, I don't think I've seen any of it. So I can't have an informed opinion on that stuff, unfortunately. But yeah, most of his stuff from the early days up until like the 60s and stuff. And I think the latest one I've seen is Amarcord.
Yeah.
So
Amarcord, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm fairly versed in Fellini, I haven't seen everything that he's made. So
what did you think of this film, I Vitelloni? How did you feel about this one?
I absolutely adored this film.
Oh, great.
I think it's because it's a really interesting sort of, even though it's his second feature film, and he had a lot of so he was like a screenwriter before he became a filmmaker. So yeah, this is his second feature film where he was at the helm, and he previously like written the scripts or co-wrote scripts for Roberto Rossellini films. Mm-hmm. So he had a foundation in Italian neorealism. So that's where I really, really dig this film, is because even though there are some elements of the more outlandish elements that Fellini would bring into some more of his his later work,
yeah,
I feel like the backbone of this film is like rooted in Italian neorealism and this sort of slice of life. And yeah, I absolutely adored this. I would probably put this in my top 3 Fellini after watching this film. Yeah, thanks for suggesting this film for me to watch, because I may not have got around to it for quite a while, so it was a pleasant surprise. And
my pleasure.
Lots of talking points.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you liked it so much. I mean, I would suggest this to anyone because it's such a good movie. For anyone who hasn't seen it, I'll just read the plot according to IMDb here. It's a character study of 5 young men at crucial turning points in their lives in a small town in Italy. So yeah, I mean, that sums it up in terms of like the overall story, because it's really about these five men who are in this small town in it's very autobiographical. Fellini was from Rimini, a small town in Italy, and moving to Rome and pursuing obviously a career in film, which you see at the end when Morado, even I get the pronunciation wrong sometimes. Morado, I believe it's pronounced. When he takes off, would you say that that's really the essence of the film? Is a coming of age story? Is that how you saw it?
For sure, I would definitely say this is a coming of age film, but it's very different to a lot of coming of age films that came after it, because typically coming of age films are of people in some maybe their late teens, or maybe in their when they're becoming teenagers into their early 20s. They're like they're pushing 30, and it's very interesting to see them sort of still clinging on to their youth. You can see them like dancing in the streets, and they're just the way they're playful with each other and things like that. So it's very interesting, because I can't think of an example where something could be considered a coming of age story where the characters are sort of a little bit older, like a decade older than what normal coming of age stories are. That's probably got something to do with the film being like set so close to like the end of the Second World War. Probably, there's a lot of post-war existentialism in the film. There's no hint to whether any of these young guys served in the war at all, but who knows, they may have done. And obviously the town is so run down and quiet, and there's not seemed to be a lot happening there, and people want to move to the big cities where everything's happening, which could have had something to do with the post-war depressions that went around Italy.
Yeah, exactly. And they're in an environment where there isn't a lot of opportunity for them, and it is more common for, as me being an Italian, my family is Italian, my heritage is Italian, and it's more common for Italians to stay home longer with their families, or even as we see with Fausto, he gets married and has a child, and they move in with the in-laws, because he's obviously he didn't have any money, so I like, I couldn't help but sort of laugh at a lot of the things these guys get up to in the film, and then at the same time they enraged me with their ignorance, and especially Fausto. But I felt that Fellini really sort of empathized with them in a lot of ways, but he doesn't shy away from their deep flaws. I mean, did you feel that he was sort of criticizing these guys, or did you feel it was more empathetic? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I think he really was able to show the worst sides, particularly of Fausto. I mean, he's pretty despicable.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy who plays him, what's his name? Franco Fabrizi.
Yeah.
I think that's it. He was in Il Bidone. I'm really bad with pronunciation, but he was also in another Fellini film. And he's fantastic in it. Like, I really enjoyed his performance. Like, he made me hate him. So he did his job really well. But there is also, you do feel a little sorry for him at times, especially when he seems remorseful for his actions, and he's searching for Sandrini because she's disappeared. And it's quite moving, I found, when he was like trying to search for her and trying to find where she is, and he goes out to the seafront, and you're thinking the worst. And I was like, oh, is this film going to be that dark? When I first watched it. Really interesting to sort of show that he does have some humanity, and he's not a completely terrible person, but probably his behavior is a culmination of a very, very different experiences in his life as he's grown up, and just clinging to his youth. And obviously at the beginning of the film, he's trying to escape and trying to not do the right thing, and not marry the girl that he's got pregnant, and he's sort of coerced into it. And he seems happy, but then he's just a womanizer, and he's just constantly on the lookout for someone else. That scene in the cinema. It's not even
that he's a womanizer. It's like any woman that moves, he goes after. It's like this guy is so horny for every single woman that he encounters. And I agree with you. I think it is more hopeful for him, because what, you know, when his wife disappears, she gets sick of his cheating. You know, he keeps cheating on her, and she takes the baby and runs. And, you know, as we saw, he's running around town looking for her, and you know, finally he does. And I I I appreciated that there was a scene where he runs into that woman who he was coming on to when they went to see a movie, when him and his wife
Yeah.
went to see a movie. And, you know, this woman gave him a clear, well, I mean, she was one of the few that, you know, she told him to stop. But she seemed, because she was married, but she seemed to be enjoying his, you know, seduction and kissing, even though she's, you know, it's kind of like, well, maybe another time, right? And then this other time now comes, and she invites him over, and he says no, right? So it, you know, I think it is more optimistic that he'll, you know, he'll grow up, and he'll stop, you know, cheating, and facing his responsibilities. And you know, because I think he really loved that woman. It's just that it's just that he cannot help but but you know, want every single woman he sees. But I really saw that as him being self-destructive in a lot of ways. And I think it goes back to the way in which his father was with him, because, you know, small town people who are not very educated, and their way to deal with problems is to use violence, right? And it was sort of funny in a way, particularly at the end when he finds her and she went to his father's house, and he's so relieved, and clearly she told his father what happened. He just locks the door, takes his belt off, I mean, you know, and starts hitting him. And there's no words between them. It's just like, here, I'm gonna beat it into you, you know. And I couldn't help but laugh at that, because on the one hand, he's treating him like an animal, almost like a kid. And you saw that in the beginning of the film. His father finds out that he got her pregnant. You know, they're Italian, they're Catholic, they're old fashioned. It's like, and he was trying to run away, and he's like, no, you're gonna marry her. I'm gonna, and he forces him to do it. So I really think, you know, I think, well, maybe I shouldn't say you truly love that woman. I'm sure that, you know, it's hard to say. I suppose it's up to the audience, but I think a lot of it was this act of rebellion and self-destruction. I mean, his father-in-law gets him a job, and then he starts to come on to his boss's wife, you know. And how would he, you know, there's no way that you're going to get away with that. Like, obviously, in a subconscious level, he was trying to destroy himself. I mean, was that your impression, or did you have another take on Fausto?
No, that's spot on. Yeah, because there is that sort of, there is another side to that. Obviously, he must have known he was never going to get away with it, but there is that interaction between the boss's wife at the party, and she's a little, she gives him the eyes, and she's a little flirtatious with him. So obviously gives him sort of like, not necessarily the go ahead, but like an idea of like, he may pursue this. And obviously she was possibly drunk at the party, and you know, it doesn't excuse his behavior, but it's just he.
And isn't that so true of men in general? Like, we get a little wink and we're like, okay, we got it. It's like, you know, I mean, I know, yeah, you're right, because it's like she just, you know, he saw a little bit of a different side to her, because she was a little more serious at work, like a little more reserved. Even the way she was dressed, she was like in, you know, business outfits, glasses, and here she is, like with a strapless dress on, and she's, you know, he sees her in a, to him, he felt that was more attractive, right? So, and he just, you know, I think she threw, I forget what those little things at parties are called, that, you know, people throw up in the air, whatever.
Like confetti.
Yeah, confetti. Like, she throw, you know, playful, and he's like, and I couldn't help but laugh afterwards when, you know, it's interesting that her husband, his boss, didn't just throw him out. He's like, let's go have a drink. He has a drink first. He's like, I'll give you, like, here's some money and get out. And you know, it was funny that, to me, and both tragic at the same time, that he turns to his boss's wife and says, I was only joking.
Yeah.
It's like, come on. I think he didn't, you know, it was like a last ditch effort on his part. Yeah, I was really, you know, fascinated by his self-destruction. I mean, this film reminds me in a lot of ways so much of what came 20 years later, Scorsese's Mean Streets. I mean, he was so much like Johnny Boy to an extent, not that he was trying to get money from everybody and not paying them back like De Niro as Johnny Boy, but for him it was more destroying himself by cheating and things like that. But just down to the opening, which you saw in Goodfellas, when Henry Hill is going through that room and introducing everybody, and it's like a POV shot of Henry Hill in the bar, and they did the exact same thing at the beginning of this film. It's much shorter, and he's like, this is such and such, this is Fausto, etc. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. I mean, every time I see a Fellini film, I see Scorsese, I see Coppola, so many of those later directors. I mean, I don't know if that was something that you thought of at all, or.
Yeah, for sure. There's other films like oh my days, is Graffiti, American Graffiti. Yeah, that I can see influences there, but yeah, it, like, Fellini is like endlessly influential on the greats that came after him decades later. So there was going to be Fellini's fingerprints in, as you said, Scorsese's and Coppola's work. So 100% saw that, particularly Mean Streets. I thought that was a really good comparison. It'd make a really good double feature, actually. Like,
absolutely, because even in Mean Streets, those guys are that's not so much of a coming of age, but they're old. No. They're all older, and they're more in touch with their juvenile side and innocent side, as opposed to their more of a mature side, and you really see that here, because as we said, these guys, they're all, Fausto's the only one who says that he's 30. He gets into a fight at a certain point with his father-in-law, and he goes, and his father-in-law throws him out. He finds out about what happened with his boss's wife, and he's like, you can't talk to me that way, I'm 30, that. So I imagine they're all 30 or close to 30. And if you look at the way they all interact, they all sort of tease each other, and they play pool, and they don't talk about anything that they're genuinely experiencing. And I think they all, occasionally they'll say, oh, if we could only go to Rome, because Fausto goes to Rome on his honeymoon, and so they're sort of not really talking about anything, and sort of just trying to have a good time as best they can. And it's really just those scenes where they go into the beach and they're all looking out into the water. And I really saw that as like a wish, it's just like, they're looking for some kind of an answer that they can't follow. And I imagine that that's very difficult to grow up in a small town, and where they have, parents who are not the best at communicating, as we saw with a couple of the various fathers. Things are just done by force. And so they're not educated, and they all, at the same time, even though they have these kind of hopes for a better life, they have these terrible attitude towards work. It's like they sort of like you saw later on with Alberto, when they're looking for Fausto's wife, and all those guys are working, and he like gives them the finger, so they sort of contradict themselves. But I think it's sort of, they're envious of those people, that those people at least have jobs, is something that they want. But really their interactions are, it's almost like when you have a certain friendship for years as a kid, and it's just, it can't evolve any more than it has. It's like you guys all need to either evolve together or evolve separately, because clearly there's something else you're yearning for. I don't know if that was your experience.
Because it's quite interesting, because they've all got their own little things that they're passionate about, haven't they? So obviously Alberto, I can't really remember what Alberto, I like that all the actors, most of the characters are there, the actors is their name, if that makes sense. So Alberto Sordi plays Alberto, Leopoldo Trieste plays Leopoldo.
That's right.
And I really found Leopoldo's sort of like story arc really quite interesting as the aspiring playwright.
I agree.
Particularly with how his sort of arc ended, because it was quite I found not shocking, but like for the time, for 1953, with like a proposition of, you know, of a two males, and obviously Leopoldo is shocked and is in horror at the, you know, the proposition he's given by this older gentleman, who, and you're like, was the older actor actually interested in his work, or was he after him for something else when they go down to the dock or whatever it is, and he runs away.
Off.
Yeah, so that was really interesting to see, for the time period as well. And
no, I agree, because you sort of you got the, you know, it was interesting because you got the impression that he was different than all of his friends, in the sense that he had certain ambitions. He wanted to be a writer. He was creative. He was writing. He had plans, whereas they didn't. And he sort of and then he has this experience where this famous actor that he was trying to get him to read his plays, and the guy is giving him all this attention. He's like, "Oh, I love your plays," and even though he said he only skimmed through it, right?
Yeah.
And clearly, you know, we later on, it was, you don't know for sure, because even the actor's like, no, that's not what I mean. And as they go down to, like, he tries to find a quiet corner with him down at the docks, and you know, that sort of terrifies Alberto, and he runs off. And to me, it was interesting because after that, his story just pretty much ended, and you have to ask yourself, well, what is the problem? And I really thought, well, here's a guy who wants to go into show business, and his experience is with a man, a famous actor that he admired, trying to come on to him. And I think it sort of scared him. You know, it was sort of almost like, I don't want to go into show business in case this happens again. You know, he's clearly, you know, I'm not saying that the film, you know, I perhaps on a contemporary viewer will say, well, that's homophobic. But I think it's when you look at who this guy is, where he comes from, what he knows, not knowing anyone who's gay, that and sure, yeah, they are homophobic. But it's not so much that the film is homophobic, but it's just that character is not comfortable or knows nothing about homosexuality. So to him, that's like the ultimate, you know, this is a sin, you know, like a sin, you know. For him, it's like, I can't go down this road because this might happen again, and I don't want anything to do with that. I don't know if that's what you thought.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Because as you said, his storyline just cuts off. I do feel like some of the other characters, as much as I love this film, I felt like, so I'm forgetting some of the names, but is it Riccardo Fellini, who does look like, Riccardo plays Riccardo. So I thought at first, is that Fellini? But it is a Fellini. It's just his brother. Riccardo is his story arc, I felt, wasn't sort of developed enough.
They didn't. He was the only one they didn't really go into. He was rather vague. He was kind of like one of the gang.
Yeah, he was just there. And he didn't really have a beginning, middle, or end to his storyline, which
I agree.
I was a bit like, no, it wasn't a huge nitpick, but he was still good in his role. But that's probably my only sort of criticism of the film, is I thought that character didn't add much to the dynamic of the group per se.
I agree.
But I really, really, really enjoyed this film. So
me too. The other Alberto Sordi, his story, I also really liked, because he lives with his mother and his sister, and he has basically assumed the father role, and he's quite mean. I mean, I really felt for his sister. Actually, I liked her a lot. Claudette Farrell, who played Olga, his sister. What was interesting with that story was that she's the one who works, and he's borrowing money from her to go to like racetrack or blow it. And she doesn't, it's a patriarchal household, clearly. I mean, she gives it to him and doesn't say anything, and then it cuts back to her looking at him like, gee, this guy's a piece of work. But it's almost like she was powerless to do anything. And then when she's at home, when he runs into her later at the beach, she's with this older guy who's married, and he gets mad at her. What are you doing with a married man? And then at home, he says, you gotta stop seeing this guy. He's married, and she says, no, he's just separated. He's gonna marry him. He's gonna marry me. And clearly Alberto doesn't like this guy, and it made me laugh when he said, "If you make our mother cry,"
Yeah.
he is so worried, and he assumes the father role, and I totally understood why she left. I mean, when he was so drunk after that party and she says goodbye and she just says she can't take it anymore, I totally understood that, because I think she really felt that she was powerless, that she could not stand up to him because of the nature of the dynamics in the house, and the only way to get a hold of her life was to run away. And I really liked the way it was acted, because it wasn't that she was angry, it wasn't that she told him off. She was really torn. I mean, clearly there was love there between the three, and she, I mean, luckily for her, he was hammered, because I think if he was sober, he may have been a little more on the aggressive side, or tried to get her to stop. But that really ends it, even for him, because then he goes upstairs and the mother's crying, and he says, oh, because she was the one taking care of everyone. And he said, and not only that, but your daughter runs off. I mean, it's quite upsetting. And he says, don't worry, I'm gonna get a job. And then she goes, do you have anything in line? And he's like, I think he says yes, or he says no, or he doesn't really give a very good answer, and then he just passes out, right?
And he falls asleep on the side. Yeah.
And I think that just sort of sums him up in a lot of ways, because then when we see him, this is before he saw those workers and flipped them off, right? So clearly that experience didn't shake him up to think that he has to now take care of his mother. It's so on the one hand, he's so concerned with his mother getting upset, but then he won't go and get a job. So, which was such an contradiction. And what I had appreciated was that the storytellers don't tell you why he's like that. I mean, it's sort of up to you to decide, and there's enough suggestions of, because of the environment that they live in, because of the fact that they're in a small town with not much opportunity, and perhaps they didn't want to just do backbreaking work, like those workers that they saw later, if they were construction workers or something along those lines, that these guys just either they had to go somewhere else, or they would just keep sinking where they were. Was that how you saw that? Or
I completely agree
else?
with well, with Alberto, it's really interesting, just to step back a little bit to talking about that scene where he's like completely plastered after the party, and Olga leaves. That is such a wonderfully acted scene, because it's a very good sort of sad clown-ish type scene.
Exactly.
Because he's putting Fausto on a pedestal, saying like Fausto is really happy, he's married, he's got a baby.
Yes.
And he doesn't realize like how unhappy, or at least not how picture perfect that his idea of happiness is. And it's very, very interesting and very layered performance, and just really well written by Fellini there. So I think that was one of my standout scenes from the film, because it has it's like an intersection for all different things. It's obviously Olga leaving, Alberto sort of being clueless about what's going on, and obviously Moraldo's there, like literally propping him up. He's like the moral core of the group. And then obviously Fausto is brought into the conversation because he's been talked about by Alberto. So it's just an all-encompassing sort of like, I think it's like the core of the film is that one scene, personally. I think it just, everything leads up to that and then branches off from that moment. So I think it's absolutely wonderfully done.
Yeah, no, well said. And what was so interesting about Moraldo is you really saw that in that scene, but he was sort of the consciousness of the piece, because he doesn't have the sort of problems that everyone else does, other than what am I going to do with my life? But they have more problems at home, or Fausto has obviously more serious problems. But he's sort of the consciousness of the film, because he's observing all of his friends doing things that, well, not everybody, but Fausto in particular, because Fausto is now his brother-in-law. So
Yeah.
he's seeing Fausto cheat on his own and on his own sister. And so he's sort of the consciousness of the piece, and he's observing his friends, sort of not, you don't know. I mean, it's up to you what he's thinking, but he's clearly confused and not happy and feeling like he needs a change in life. And what I really found fascinating was that he then befriends this little kid, this little kid who like has a job somewhere. And, it's almost like he would rather go and talk to this kid than he would with his own friends,
Well, yeah, the kid's got like more going for him. Like he's obviously not, he's got a job, and he obviously probably doesn't seem to have the worries of what a 30-year-old adult would, which is why the closing scenes for this film are so absolutely incredible. It absolutely blew my socks off when I saw it. Particularly the camera movement when Moraldo's leaving on the train, and you see all of his friends asleep in bed, basically sleeping their life. And it's like he's on the train watching them, like he's pulling away, and it's just so good. And then obviously the Moraldo's friend that he makes, and he's just innocently balancing on the train tracks and just sort of not a care in the world. And it's just such a stark contrast between the lives of everyone else in town that are trying to get by, and just probably longing to be like this child with not much care in the world, and has a job at the same time.
Yeah, well, that last scene to me was so devastating, because there was this sort of bond between Moraldo and this kid, and he doesn't even know that Moraldo's gonna leave, and he's kind of like, where are you going? Don't you like it here anymore? And he doesn't really answer, and he doesn't even know where he's gonna go. Like, I like that one of the last things he says is, I don't know. I sort of like when films end with I don't know, because so many movies give you answers, and often in life there is, you do your best, but there's no perfect answer, and I really like that is one of the last things he says is I don't know. And then he just says, his friends like, well, if you're leaving, then goodbye. And it's not like, I'm not saying it's such a tearjerker in this, like, oh, these two people are apart, because I think you're right. Like the little kid is this carefree kid, like he's happy. And I think the fact that, I mean, it was such a beautiful thing to see him, like, just trying to balance on the tracks, just his innocence, that, and he's so very carefree and enjoying his life. I mean, maybe that's sort of a warning that perhaps that perhaps in 10 years or so he's going to be equally as confused, or maybe not. Maybe he'll be totally fine. Like I don't think Fellini's necessarily saying, oh, everybody's got to get out of here. I mean, I think he's just kind of looking at these men and where they're at, and where their struggles are, and what they want to do, and how they're trying to get there. Because clearly Fausto is, things are getting better, or they are more optimistic, but he's not necessarily going to Rome, and there's nothing, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. I do find Fausto's conclusion with Sandrine and his child really interesting, because although everything seems tied up, I still have that feeling that he may do something like he's done in the past again. He's not a completely changed person, even based on the scare that he had. It may take him a while to behave inappropriately again, but I just felt that the character hadn't truly changed.
That's true. It's not simple. It's I think it leaves everybody sort of like uneasy, but which I prefer, because it's not just that we saw him behaving badly, let's say half of the film, and then he changed halfway through. Like it's like he's behaving so badly throughout the whole film, and then it's not really till the end where you see something a little different. So that's why I think anyone, even in real life, would be like, I don't know if I trust this. So which I prefer, because it makes you wonder, what happens to this guy, what happens to him and his relationship. But no, it's it's a wonderful, wonderful film. I mean, it's very direct in a lot of ways, and simple, but yet in a good way. It's not to criticize it, but yet leaves you. It really brings you into the film emotionally, and has you feel the struggles of these people, and doesn't feed you something that is easy, that some kind of solution. I mean, they're
Exactly.
all at the end still up against it. None of them solved anything or got the MacGuffin at the end. No one's heroic. Everyone is still struggling, and yes, a couple of them got their foot in the door a little bit.
Yeah.
Even the fact that Moraldo's leaving, that's a step, for him, anyways. Is a step forward. So, no, it's a wonderful, wonderful film. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about this one, Sam?
Yeah. The music,
Oh
the
yeah.
score, Nino Rota, legendary
Oh
score,
God, yeah.
composer, like ridiculous amount. I think
I mean, yeah, absolutely.
over like 150 scores, or maybe even more. I think, yeah,
Says
on average in
here
the 50s, he was,
182.
yeah. So I think in the 50s, he
Uh,
was averaging like 10 scores a year,
oh my God, yeah.
which is ridiculous. And obviously he wrote the scores for The Godfather, which
Yeah.
won him an Academy Award. And he basically scored pretty much all of
Oh
Fellini's
yeah.
work, I
Well, the
think.
eight and a
So,
half score is also like, it just stays in your head. It's just,
mm,
it is unbelievably good. But this one as well. I mean, it works so beautifully, I thought. And it's not as, it doesn't sort of hit you over the head. It's
no,
not sort of it's not necessarily elevating the film to with the music. It's just very much complementing everything. It's much more subtle, I found.
yeah, 100%. I just thought I had to mention that because I was blown away by the score, and
Yeah.
I was like, just checking who it was, and I was like, I think this is a Nino
Oh
Rota
yeah.
score, and then I was like, of course it is, because him and Fellini just basically collabed on everything, I think, pretty
Oh
much.
God, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Most of them.
his go-to guy. So, and he doesn't disappoint on this one. It really does subtly just add something to the scenes and stuff. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I think sometimes it's like good editing. Sometimes, like, there's nothing wrong with a really grand luscious score, but sometimes a nice low-key
I
score
agree.
that is like good editing, where you don't notice the editing is good editing. You know what I mean? So,
Exactly. Yeah. It
but
doesn't draw
sometimes really,
attention to
yeah.
itself
But
as
then
much.
on the
Yeah.
odd occasion, some like really in your face editing can work.
Absolutely.
But like this score was really quite low key, and I just thought it was really, really good. So I thought I had to mention that.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I'm glad you did. What is the can you tell us a bit more about what your YouTube channel is all about? I know it's discussing Blu-rays, films, physical media. Is it purely about physical media, or is there
No,
other
not
things you do?
well. I'm on a bit of a break at the moment from creating YouTube videos because I'm currently in the process of doing my master's thesis. So I'm studying global film studies at the moment.
Oh, great.
So yeah, so that sort of extracurricular activity has had to take a bit of a backseat the last few months. But yeah, generally, recently I've been doing like Criterion Roundtable videos with some of
I've
my
been really
friends in the
enjoying those.
community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we just have a few people who like are known faces in the community who just happen to be my friends as well. And yeah, we just discuss films in the Criterion collection that we enjoy, and then we also each pick a film that isn't in the collection that we would like to see get the treatment.
Oh, great.
So, but yeah, just film discussions. Yeah, I'm big into like film restoration, so that's why I like to collect a lot of physical media, because a lot of the films that are put out these days on like the boutique labels are like from restoration projects and stuff, and I'm really into supporting that. And yeah, I'm a bit of a audio visual file, so I like things in the best quality format personally. But yeah, that's just what I talk about: films, Blu-ray, and just discussions about anything that's film related. So, but hopefully once my thesis is completed in the summer, I'll be back to creating some more content. So, because I really enjoy just having the conversations with people and interacting with people that have the same passion as me. So, yeah, so that's my channel. It's it's just called Film Blogger Sam on YouTube. So,
Okay, great. No, fantastic. No, I highly recommend people checking out Sam's channel. I really enjoyed those roundtables in particular. I thought there's some movies that you all brought up that some of them I hadn't even heard of, and or some I hadn't seen yet. So I really enjoyed those. And you're also on social media, Twitter and everything. Yeah.
Twitter and Instagram under Film Blogger Sam as well. So yeah.
Great.
I just
fantastic.
post on there things that I picked up and films that I've been watching recently. So yeah.
Great. All right. Fantastic. Well, I will leave those links in the description box below where you can check out Sam's channel and subscribe to it as well and follow him on social media. So the links are in the description box below. Sam, thanks again for joining me today, taking the time to watch the film and sharing your feelings about it. So I hope we could do it again sometime. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm 100% up for that. Just let me know and we can book something else in the future. I'm totally up for this sort of conversation. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to my YouTube channel on the audio version of the podcast and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I have ever recorded can be found, youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you are interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is bonus content that I create month in and month out. And it is based on polls that I put out at the beginning of every single month, which as a member, you will have access to vote on, which means that you will be very much part of the decision-making as to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. And lastly, if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel and you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.